The Battle of Brushy Creek, Texas Rangers vs. Comanche, 1839. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories, where we uncover the untold tales of America's frontier past. Join our growing community of history enthusiasts. Subscribe now to never miss an episode of these incredible true stories that shaped our nation. The year was 1839. The sun was setting over Bastrop, Texas, casting long shadows across a landscape where death could strike at any moment. In this small village east of Austin, life appeared deceptively peaceful. Smoke rose from chimneys as families prepared their evening meals, unaware that they lived on borrowed time. This was the Texas Republic, newly independent from Mexico after the Revolution of 1836, but far from secure in its position on the bleeding edge of Western civilization. Within the town's wooden buildings and scattered homesteads lived a complex tapestry of humanity. Wealthy landowners, their fortunes built on the back of slave labor, occupied the larger houses. Their slaves, subjected to the harsh realities of chattel servitude, worked the surrounding fields and performed household duties. K'iche' natives, who had called these lands home for generations before the arrival of European settlers, moved quietly through the community. Tejano citizens, descendants of the original Spanish colonists, maintained their cultural traditions while adapting to life under the new republic. The warning system that would save their lives was simple yet crucial: a brass horn's lonely cry followed by 2 gunshots. Then another horn, more shots echoing across the settlements, until a cannon's boom would shake the town itself. This was no mere precaution, it was survival for in these lands. The Comanche ruled with terrifying efficiency, their mere name enough to send shivers down the spines of even the most hardened frontiersmen. Their raids had become legendary, striking fear into the hearts of all who dared settle in what the Spanish called Comanche. The past decade had witnessed unspeakable brutality that made even the horrors east of the Mississippi pale in comparison. No one was safe, not the wealthy ranchers in their wooden mansions, not the slaves working the cotton fields, not the K'iche' natives or Tejano families who had called this land home for generations. The Comanche warriors showed no mercy, their attacks leaving trails of devastation that would haunt survivors for decades. The brutality knew no bounds. Entire families disappeared overnight, their homes reduced to smoldering ruins. Those who survived bore witness to torture killings, sexual assaults, and violence that transcended all boundaries of race, gender, social class, religious affiliation, nationality, and age. The Apache Tonkawa and Karankawa tribes had fallen victim to Comanche raids, as had Spanish and Mexican settlements that had stood for over a century. Colonel Edward Burleson, veteran of the Texas Revolution and current Army Chief of Staff, had seen enough of the aftermath. The scattered remains of homesteads, the stories of torture, the families torn apart, all had led him to implement the warning system that would give Bastrop citizens their only chance at survival. Each homestead knew the protocol. Upon spotting raiders, sound the brass horn long and clear. Fire 2 shots in rapid succession. The next homestead would repeat the signal, creating a chain of warnings that would culminate in the boom of Bastrop's defensive cannon. But on this particular evening in February, as darkness crept across the Texas frontier, the threat felt distant, almost imaginary. The citizens of Bastrop went about their evening routines, the tension of frontier life momentarily forgotten. Women tended to cooking fires, children completed their evening chores, and men saw to the day's final tasks. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of purple and orange, casting long shadows across the dusty streets and wooden buildings. Yet in the gathering dusk, destiny was already in motion. None could have known that this peaceful evening would soon erupt into one of the most shocking episodes in Texas history. The peaceful evening shattered in an instant. A high-pitched bugle call pierced the air, its mournful tone carrying across the darkening landscape. 2 sharp gunshots followed, their reports echoing through the settlement. Before the echoes had faded, another bugle sounded closer to town, accompanied by 2 more shots. Then came the deep, resonant boom of Bastrop's warning cannon, its sound rolling like thunder through the streets. The dreaded signal system had been activated. The Comanche were attacking. Men rushed from their homes, grabbing weapons and ammunition as they converged on the town square. Through gasping breaths, messengers delivered the horrific news. The Coleman homestead had been hit. Elizabeth Coleman, a widow, and her 5 children were the targets of a massive raiding party combining Comanche, Kiowa, and Weko warriors. The attack had begun in the Coleman's fields, where James Coleman and family friend James Rogers had been preparing the soil for spring planting. The warriors had emerged without warning, cutting off their retreat to the cabin. Only the thick forest cover had allowed the young men to escape, but their flight meant precious minutes lost in warning the others. Back at the cabin, Elizabeth Coleman and her 4 younger children had been tending their garden, unaware of the approaching danger. The late afternoon sun caught the glint of weapons as several hundred warriors charged toward them. At full gallop, there were cries splitting the air. Elizabeth screamed for her children to run, cut through the chaos. 3 of the children sprinted for the cabin's safety, but 5-year-old Thomas, his short legs unable to carry him fast enough, remained exposed. What followed was a mother's nightmare realized. A warrior swept past at full gallop, snatching Thomas from the ground with practiced ease. Elizabeth's maternal instincts overrode all sense of self-preservation. She spun and lunged for her child, her fingers almost grazing his outstretched hand. The arrow that struck her throat had been loosed with deadly accuracy, but her determination allowed her to stagger back to the cabin. Inside, 12-year-old Albert Coleman was already moving with the decisiveness of a seasoned warrior. As his mother collapsed, blood seeping from her wound, he helped her bar the heavy wooden door against the thundering blows of the warriors outside. His young mind processed the situation with remarkable clarity. 3 guns in the cabin, limited ammunition, and the lives of his younger siblings in his hands. The first warrior to breach the door met instant death from Albert's precise shot. A second warrior fell back wounded, creating momentary confusion among the attackers. In that brief respite, Albert demonstrated both tactical thinking and brotherly love. He pried up the loose floorboards, creating a makeshift shelter. "Get under here," he commanded his terrified siblings. "Don't make a sound. Don't come out until you hear English voices. Promise me." The battle resumed with increased fury. Albert moved between firing positions, reloading and firing with such speed and accuracy that the warriors believed they faced multiple defenders. His shots rang out in a steady rhythm. Aim, fire, reload, repeat. Each time the warriors attempted to rush the door, Albert's fire drove them back. The cabin's logs were scarred by arrows and bullets, but the young defender held his ground. Minutes stretched into what seemed like hours. Albert's ammunition began to run low, but his determination never wavered. He fought with the strength of a man 3 times his age, drawing upon reserves of courage that would become legendary in Texas frontier history. But even legends can fall. A warrior's bullet found its mark, striking the young hero in the chest. As his lifeblood ebbed away, Albert's thoughts remained with his hidden siblings. With his final breaths, he called out to them one last time, reinforcing his instructions to stay hidden and silent. Then he slumped beside his mother's body, having given his life to save his family. The warriors, after their costly assault on the cabin, took young Thomas and moved on to their next target, the nearby farm of Dr. Joseph Robertson. The Robertson farmstead stood empty of its owners, but the Comanche raiders found other targets. 7 slaves denied the basic right of self-defense, without access to firearms, could offer no resistance. The warriors swiftly bound their captives, adding them to their growing count of prisoners, destined for a harsh life in Comanche, Korea. As the sun climbed higher in the afternoon sky, John D. Anderson approached the Coleman homestead, the unusual silence drawing his attention. An experienced frontiersman, he noted the absence of typical farm sounds. No livestock, no voices, no movement. The scene that greeted him inside the cabin would haunt him forever. The bodies of Elizabeth and Albert Coleman, the floor scarred with bullet holes and stained with blood, telling the tale of the desperate last stand. Then came a sound that stopped his heart, a faint whimper from beneath the floorboards. Anderson discovered the 2 surviving children, still faithfully following their brother's final instructions to stay hidden until they heard English voices. Time was of the essence. Anderson knew the raiders could return at any moment. He quickly lifted the terrified children onto his horse, positioning them securely before him. Then began a desperate 12-mile ride to Wells Fort, every hoofbeat carrying them closer to safety, as Anderson constantly scanned the horizon for signs of pursuit. At Wells Fort, the children's story sparked immediate action. Runners dispersed to neighboring settlements, their warnings creating a ripple effect across the frontier. In Bastrop, the men who answered the call found themselves under the command of Jacob Burleson, brother to the renowned Colonel Edward Burleson. A complicated mixture of Texas Rangers and civilian volunteers, they formed a hunting party driven by equal parts vengeance and duty. The search stretched through the night, the trackers following signs that would be invisible to untrained eyes, broken twigs, disturbed grass, hidden hoofprints. As morning light spilled across the landscape, their persistence paid off. Near Post Oak Island, for miles north of Brushy Creek, they finally spotted the massive war party. This moment of discovery, however, was just the beginning of their challenge. What followed was a masterclass in the stark differences between Eastern and Comanche warfare. The Texians, many trained in traditional military tactics, witnessed what appeared to be a full retreat, as the Comanche warriors fled toward a densely wooded thicket. Operating on their Eastern woodland training, the Texians pursued in a tactical zigzag pattern, attempting to cut off escape routes. When they closed to rifle range, they made what would prove to be a critical error. They dismounted to form a traditional battle line. The Comanche response demonstrated their superior grasp of plains warfare. The seeming retreat transformed instantly into a devastating counterattack. Warriors wheeled their horses with incredible skill, turning the tables on their now vulnerable opponents. The Texian line disintegrated as men scrambled for their horses, suddenly understanding the fatal flaw in their strategy. In the chaos, young Ranger W.S. Wallace found himself in a nightmare scenario. His panicked horse bolted toward the Comanche lines, leaving him stranded and exposed on the open plain. Death seemed certain as he sprinted toward his comrades, the thunder of pursuing hoofs growing louder behind him. But then came an act of extraordinary courage. Captain Jack Haney, seeing Wallace's desperate plight, wheeled his horse around and charged back into danger. Time seemed to slow as Haney approached Wallace at full gallop. With practiced precision, he reached down and swept his fellow ranger onto his horse, the two men's lives hanging in the balance of that single, fluid motion. Arrows filled the air around them, their deadly whisper a reminder of how close death had come. Haney's horse, carrying its double burden, raced back to safety as the Comanche warriors pulled up, perhaps offering a moment of respect for such a display of bravery. In the chaos of retreat, another scene of sacrifice unfolded. Captain Jacob Burleson, Franklin H. Smith, and young Winslow Turner had nearly reached their mounts when disaster struck. Turner's horse, still firmly picketed to the ground, strained against its tether. The boy's trembling fingers fumbled with the knot as the thunder of Comanche hoofs grew closer. Without hesitation, Captain Burleson turned back. "Ride, Highsmith," he shouted, already dismounting. His boots hit the ground as he sprinted toward Turner. With practiced hands, he freed the horse while pushing the teenager toward the saddle. Turner scrambled up and spurred his mount to safety. But in those precious seconds of rescue, Burleson had sealed his own fate. Just as his fingers grasped his horse's reins, a shot rang out. The bullet struck him in the back of his head, and Captain Jacob Burleson, veteran of countless frontier battles, fell face first into the Texas soil. The Rangers retreated 3 miles toward Wells Fort, the sound of Comanche victory cries echoing in their ears as their horses heaved for breath. The men's minds tortured them with knowledge of what was happening to their commander's body. They had all seen it before. The ritualistic mutilation the Comanche believed would weaken their enemies' spirits in the afterlife. Stories of such discoveries had haunted frontier settlements for years, whispered around fires, as warnings of the price of failure. Anger and shame warred in their hearts. Some wanted to return immediately. Others counseled caution. The debate grew heated, fingers pointing, voices rising, with accusations of cowardice mixing with calls for vengeance. Then hoofbeats approached. Not the dreaded sound of Comanche raiders, but reinforcements. 30 Rangers and volunteers galloped into view, led by Colonel Edward Burleson. The colonel's face hardened as he learned of his brother's fate. Grief transformed instantly to iron determination as he took command of the combined force, 84 men now united in purpose. They rode back toward Brushy Creek, past the thicket where the ambush had sprung. They found Jacob Burleson's body, confirming their worst fears of its treatment. Each man who saw it felt their resolve strengthen. Beyond the thicket, the landscape opened to reveal a formidable sight. The Comanche and their allies had claimed the high ground, arranging themselves in a massive horseshoe formation atop a plateau overlooking Brushy Creek. It was a classic defensive position, allowing them to observe any approach while maintaining the advantage of elevation. Colonel Burleson studied the terrain through narrowed eyes. Years of frontier warfare had taught him to read landscapes like military maps. He divided his force with tactical precision. Captain Billingsley would lead half the men in a frontal assault from below, while Captain Rogers' contingent would use a hidden ravine to strike from behind. It was a sound strategy on paper, but the reality proved more challenging. Both groups found themselves trapped 50 yards from the Comanche position, pinned down in a deadly stalemate. The open ground between them might as well have been miles wide. Any man who crossed it would face certain death. The battle settled into a tense exchange of fire, each side probing for weaknesses. From the Comanche position, one warrior demonstrated exceptional skill. His single-shot rifle cracked with deadly precision, each round finding its mark. Texians fell to his accuracy, and several others nursed wounds from his deadly aim. The sniper seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to anticipate movement, his bullets arriving. The instant a Texian exposed themselves to fire, young Winslow Turner, the dead of his life, weighing heavily after Burleson's sacrifice, watched the pattern of gunfire intently. The warrior's skill demanded respect, but it also created a pattern. Turner's eyes traced the path of smoke rising from the hidden position after each shot. Slowly, methodically, he began to understand the rhythm of the sniper's deadly work. The next shot would reveal the exact location. If Turner could maintain his patience just a moment longer. Turner moved with calculated precision. He scaled a nearby tree, the rough bark biting into his palms. As he found a stable position among the branches, the elevation gave him a clear view of the telltale wisp of smoke rising after each of the Comanche sniper's shots. Turner steadied his rifle, controlling his breathing as he had been taught. When the next shot rang out, he was ready. His bullet found its mark with deadly accuracy, ending the reign of the skilled warrior. As darkness crept across the battlefield, the Comanche and their allies melted away into the night. Their retreat was accompanied by haunting death songs that drifted across the blood-stained ground, primal expressions of grief for their fallen brothers. The sound sent chills through even the most hardened rangers. In the eerie stillness that followed, the rangers discovered a lone survivor at the abandoned Comanche position, one of the captured slaves, his body pierced by 9 arrows.